of each other in sort of getting together out in the community again. But today's talk will briefly touch on what I do, and then offering a little bit of empowerment and how you can support your children, young people, and young adults within the education sector. Most notably, we are in a SEND crisis currently. I would beg to differ. I would say that, in fact, we are in a SEND abyss because it is no longer a crisis. And effectively what I do, I combine my law, public health sciences, and educational knowledge through psychology, neurology, and blend it all together and provide a service to help those on the autistic spectrum, rare disease, or any other differing abilities that prohibit or stop them from accessing education and healthcare and social care. So a little bit about me. So I've got my own business, my own company. I have been awarded 2 fellowships from the Royal Society for my work within law, education and health, food science. I'm a member of the Bar of Human Rights Committee and other educational study committees and groups. And I'm also an expert witness. So today I really want to speak about stuck in the middle. And what is stuck in the middle? So children, young people, and often adults who have a diagnosis of ASD feel stuck in the middle, primarily because they don't fit specialist schools or environments, and they don't fit mainstream provisioning due to a whole host of reasons. It could be the environment, it could be the social construct, it could be the academics or trying to fit in or understanding, or even the disability itself. Within the UK, we have mainstream provisioning and we have specialist provisioning. Yet nothing in the middle for our children, young people and adults who just don't fit into those models. What happens then? And not only because I'm a professional, but I am also a mother with a child who has autism, rare diseases and complex neurological differing abilities. And for years and years and years, I struggled to articulate how my child presented. And after years of research, I finally stumbled across DME. What is DME? So it's double and multiple exceptionality. And in America, it's termed as 2E or 2ME. And what is this? Basically, it's when children, young people and adults have a potential. Regardless of what that potential is. In fact, everybody has a potential. And just because you have learning difficulties or any other diagnosis does not mean that you don't have a potential. And so I found myself saying or talking about my child in with an enigma point of view, because he can and can't equally at the same time. What do we do then? How do we then articulate this so that professionals, clinicians, doctors, local authorities, schools, head teachers, SENCOs understand this? And so DME is recognized through the psychological theory books as equally can and can't, and your young person, child, adult will have the notion or an ability or giftedness to be able to achieve, but also equally have a learning difficulty. And that's fine, because we can all achieve, we can all attain. The secret is, though, is finding out what it is that your loved one, child, young person and adult is good at. Everybody is good at something, even though we can still have profound difficulties and disabilities. They will be good at something, whether it's food, whether it's music, whether it's sport, whether it's creativity. That is what you focus on. And when you focus on that giftedness, then you can adapt and change the learning to fit that person. And so much so that when the language and the curricula is changed, they then can fall into an environment that is adapted and suited to themselves. And so, let me go back. And so it's looking at the potential of your child. And in the UK, it's called Potential Plus. And most often, we also can associate with dyslexia, dysgraphia, hearing difficulties. It could also be the fact that the reading difficulties or hearing difficulties to interpret and understand education or academia prohibit. However, if the environment is adjusted, if the curricula is adjusted, then your child, young person, and adult will cope better. They will have an understanding of how they can cope, and that will then translate into being more independent, or their mental health will potentially increase and their anxiety levels will drop when you simply focus on what they're good at. And you can take this information and impart it to your SENCOs, your clinicians, your psychologists, educational psychologists, because most notably, they don't use this yet. It's not something that is used often enough to be incorporated into any SENCO learning material modules at university or teacher modules. And it's something that educational psychologists and psychologists are not really using at the moment. So I'm trying to push this DME or double multiple exceptionality into the wider remit or area within SEND, so that parents are empowered to be able to read up and research on this, because every child can, every human can, when the environment is differentiated, when the curricula is differentiated. Spiky profile children, often they will shy away. ASD won't necessarily allow for the direct communication. That said, if you change the environment but focus on the particular giftedness of that person or child, what then happens is that the barriers start breaking down and the spiky profile will start evening out. That way, it then offers the professional, especially at school, or even specialist schools or mainstream schools, the ability to work with the child and not just simply use an educational and health and care plan as a guide. It's following what the human is capable of doing rather than merely focusing on their disabilities. So what I do use is an unconscious bias exercise, and especially for those who have rare diseases or ASD, Asperger's, or any other differing disabilities or conditions, because everybody, including myself, has bias. And what I would like to impart is, with the DME, is to use and utilize an unconscious bias exercise. What do I mean by this? So an unconscious bias exercise, for example, is, and I'm going to ask you to judge me, criticize me right now. I'm putting myself here on an open block. So I'm going to give you 3 statements, and then I'm going to allow you to choose a statement that best fits me, and then write them down, and then Tally will give me the information thereafter, and then I will relay that to give you, whether you're right or wrong, it doesn't really matter, but it just highlights your bias that you have when looking at me. So clearly I've got an accent. And so I would like to offer you this. So you can look at me and judge me to your heart's consent. Number 1, am I, or do I come from Africa, Germany, or the UK? That's number one. So you can look at me and make your decisions. Number two is, most of you have already researched me, so you will know, but for the wider audience, so am I 30 to 40? Am I 50 to 60? Or am I 20 to 30? So there you go. Make your choice now. And lastly, the next question I'm going to put out is, do I look like as you can judge me, am I a swimmer? Am I a dancer? Or do I run marathons? So those questions, you can then look at me, judge me, and based on that, you can then learn how you base your unconscious bias on decision makings already, especially with regards when judging or analyzing people with disabilities. So we all do it. I included in myself, and through my exercises with the wider audience, I over time try and change my mindset to become less biased. So put your answers down, and I'm sure Tally will give me the feedback, and then I'll tell you the answers to those questions or statements, really.
They're coming in thick and fast. So we've got, you're a 50 to 60 African dancer. You're a 30 to 40 African runner. You are a 50 to 60 African swimmer. Africa, 40 to 60 swimmer so far.
Wow. So can you see there's a whole plethora of judging going on, and just probably based on what I look like and what I'm speaking, you can see where this bias is starting to formulate and how you're already prejudging me just based on what I'm saying and what I'm looking like, and just giving you some facts. So hopefully this mini exercise that I've now imparted will give you a better understanding of how others are judging your children or young people, even teachers or professionals, so you can then impart this information back to them so to become less biased. So I'm loving those answers so far. It's really good. So we'll keep me informed, Tally. So if you want to know what I do, and before I start imparting more about health and education, feel free to look me up at my website, normal-like-me.com. And a lot of people ask me, well, what is normal like me? And many years ago, with regards to my own personal journey with the special educational needs, legal and health frameworks within the United Kingdom, my son was denied an education purely on the grounds of his differing disabilities. However, the DME he equally could attain, but didn't want to be stuck in an environment that would regress him. And his one day came out with a statement and said, "Mummy, I am normal like me. That's just it." And it stuck. So that phrase just stuck. "Mummy, I'm normal like me. Why can't people just accept me for who I am?" And normal like me was then born, or the name was born from that statement from my son. And because everybody is normal just as themselves, without any other connotation to that. So feel free to look me up. Right, so SEND Educational Accountability Act. What is this all about? I often get questions coming to me, emails coming to me. What am I doing? What do I research? And how can you help me in terms of autism? How can you help me in terms of finding specialist provisioning? Why won't the government listen to me? Why is it so difficult? Often parents are in tatters. And because of my own journey, personal journey for my son, and my professional journey, I've combined everything, and I'm now doing, or trying to finish, my doctorate or PhD in writing new legislation. And the new legislation is seeking to put together an accountability act, because at the end of the day, your children, young people and adults and loved ones, regardless of their difficulties, varying abilities, or double, multiple exceptionalities, are human. And I don't feel that I have to, why should I have to protect myself from a government that is here ultimately as its first duty to protect me or its wider remit citizens? And so, together with all my information and various legal cases, I'm writing an Accountability Act, because at the end of the day, when the government or its local authorities or professionals get it wrong, they should be held to account, because the impact when it goes wrong really affects our young people, it affects our families, the wider family, and the mental health of our children, young people, and adults and family members is distraught, it's broken. And the cost impact then, not only to repair the damage, but also to put back the education or health, is then often double, triple, quadrupled. And so if a government or its local authorities get it wrong, just like the Equality Act, we need to have a body or an act or piece of legislation that holds the government and its local authorities to account when they get it wrong. Because currently, the SEND crisis that's now in an abyss is continuing. And I do not want our loved ones to continue down this downward spiral. And joining together the health principles for double, multiple exceptionality, anyone with ASD, any other diagnosis, rarity or not, I need to impart and educate, even empower those who do not know the health principles or what the health principles are. And currently in the United Kingdom, the government has two duties. The first duty of our government is to keep safe all its citizens and to protect them from harm, undue harm. And any harm, regardless of who has caused it, is considered harm, be it at school, be it at denying of education or denying of social care, denying of processes to encourage or early intervene. That is caused, or that is seen in legal terms as harm, because if your person is harmed, your mental health, emotional health, educational health is harmed, that's harmed. And so the government has a duty, a first duty, to keep its citizens safe from undue harm. The second duty of a government is to ensure, of our government rather, is to ensure that it abides by health principles. What are health principles? So the legal term for health is, it's not just the absence of a disease. Many people just assume that health is when you are healthy and you don't have the cold, you don't have any worrying diseases, etc., etc. Whilst that is also technically correct, it is not legally true. There are 9 principles which have been ratified by our country in 1946, and they are produced by the World Health Organization and are implemented into our judicial legislative system. And we have to, or our government has to, abide by them. So health is the overriding legal connectivity, duty that the government has to ensure that its citizens are looked after and healthy. And when one is healthy, we have to abide by the health principles, which are the right to a family, the right to education, the right to equal fair justice, the right to have physical, medical, psychological intervention, the right to love who you like, the right to have a family and a wider community and friends, the right to a religion, and also the right to have religion and shelter and food and clothing. And so that is what health is. That is what it means to be healthy. And so when you are going up against your government or local authorities or professionals, you first have to tell them that A, you do not want your family members to be harmed as the first duty. And the second duty, you want the health principles to be abided by. In that, you want your children to be healthy and educated, mental health, physical health, emotional health, and all of that to be put together for the purposes of your children and young people and adults when they have varying disabilities or difficulties. And so I can't stress this enough that please, please, please know these health principles, because they will ultimately guide you through the difficult times, and get your local authorities to support you, and also adhere to legislation. Looking at the child and young person and their rights and suitable education, and looking at environments. What is a suitable environment, and what are the indicators of a suitable environment? And whilst in the UK we have great educational legislation, what it doesn't account for is your child to be educated or cared for in a suitable environment. And I really, really, really want you to take this on board and use this to take back to your local authorities, your schools, head teachers, because without being in a suitable environment, the provisioning, no matter how great and spectacular it is, will not allow your child to feel comfortable. And ultimately, when you are comfortable in an environment, you then relax, the stresses dissipate, and you can then learn accordingly. However, I'm also trying to embed or implement or write legislation that will account for suitable education or a suitable environment for education, so that your children, young people, feel comfortable. Because at the end of the day, regardless if you have varying difficulties or disabilities or not, I, as an upstanding member of the community, also do not like to be put into an environment where it makes me feel uncomfortable. Right, today I'm quite comfortable speaking to everybody, albeit coming from my home. I prefer to be face to face, so I feel a little bit edgy, I feel a little bit uneasy, but I can manage it. However, I need to look around at the environment. Now, the environment is not just about trees, the sun, the sand, the soil, but everything that affects you on this. And sadly and regrettably, the UK does not do well in this area. And domain 5, which is part of the Kids Index, which is part of the United Nations report, a yearly annual report, looks at children in the 181 ratified UN countries and how they are managed and how they cope, how they are cared for, how their education is delivered. And we look at, in particular, the environment of the UK and domain 5. And it's with great sadness that, again, the UK has slipped to the bottom of the bottom of the bottom. And we rank last in terms of domain 5 and the indicators that support children, especially children with disabilities. And you can look at these domains on the screen, and it's non-discrimination, best interest of the child, respect for the views of the child and participation, enabling legislation, best available budgets, that's a big one, data, looking at how your children's rights are adapted in society, the right to life, the right to health, education, the right to protection, and enabling environments for the rights of your child. And whether it's political austerity, whether it's a political forecasting, whether it's an underlying miscommunication by Parliament itself, the House of Commons, whether it's differentiating views, the joined up understanding of how an environment affects your children, young people with varying disabilities is currently unstable in the UK. I want you to take a note of this information, and so you go back to your schools, you go back to your head teachers and your local authorities and your professionals, and you impart this for the purposes of empowering them so that they then start having a mind shift to change what they're doing and why they're doing it and how they're doing it, so your children ultimately have a better environment. And then when that starts happening, the whole of the UK will start improving, and their lives, anxiety, mental health, emotional, physical health of our children will improve. And that's what we need to focus on. And at the end of the session, or I will hand over to Tally all the links, and the links are also available on my Facebook page, my professional Facebook page, also my personal page, but I'll also hand them over to Tally, and she can put them up on the website. So further ado, we're going on to still looking at double multiple exceptionality and the support for your loved ones, your children, young people, and how to teach. And again, this is a very, very, very difficult subject, because we don't necessarily want to go to a teacher who's had 30, 40 years of experience. We don't want to walk into a head teacher and say, "You're not teaching my child accordingly." Nobody really wants to walk into a school or into an institution to tell the professional that what they're doing is really not correct or not suitable. However, in this country again, we have what is called pedagogy or embedded learning. And what is embedded learning and what is pedagogy? It is supported by the Department for Education, and you can take this back to your schools, your special schools, your colleges, and ask the teachers or the lecturers to teach using this method. What is this method? Well, again, not everybody can attain academia or sit in the same structured routine. Everybody needs a varying way of accessing the curricula, whether it's differentiated. However, most notably for ASD, and because of that exceptionality and double exceptionality, the learning, but also the thriving on a particular subject or a topic, this is ideal. And I always use the loaf of bread as an analogy. And let's say your child, loved one, family member loves bread. How can we teach the entire subject curricula known to man using one loaf of bread? It is, I have to say, absolutely categorically true. You can teach sociology, religion, psychology, chemistry, physiology, geography, agriculture, horticulture with one loaf of bread. And how do we do that? So we take one loaf of bread or an object or a subject or a topic, and we break it down into all its component parts. And we look at bread. Well, what is bread? So we need horticulture and agriculture. We need light, we need chemistry, we need water to grow the seed. We need the farmer. We need the ploughing of the fields. We need the tractor. We need the fuel for the tractor. So now we can start throwing in all the different component parts. We've already covered horticulture, agriculture, chemistry, machinery, engineering, all of that already, and we haven't even made the loaf of bread. We are still only growing the seed. Then we look into the different sciences. We can look at weather patterns. We can look at physics, we can look at astrophysics, we can look at the positioning of the moon, the sun, the weather patterns. And just simply to grow the wheat. Once the wheat is grown, we then go to the mill. We look at the history of the mill, how the flour is made, what is flour. Now we start looking into the physiology, the chemistry, nutrition, and we can then look at the culture of bread. Where is bread? What is bread? Who has eaten bread? Is bread eaten in India? Is bread eaten in Africa? Is bread eaten, then we break it further down into looking at routines of bread. How does bread impact health? Is bread good? Where is bread used? Oh, bread's used in school, it's used in hospitals, it's used as a staple in varying other countries. We look at the nutrition, how it affects you, how it affects your health and well-being. Is bread good for you? We look at the religious aspect of bread. Is bread eaten in Egypt? Is bread eaten in Sudan? Or maybe also from the artistry side, looking at bread in artisan shapes, different various processes of bread, etc., etc., etc. And all of that, all of the subjects, science, maths, literacy, you name it, can be covered by one topic using pedagogy or embedded learning. And take this back to your teachers, or even if you home educate or homeschool, and use it and you embed this into your daily routines. And I guarantee you, your children will be absorbing all this information and will then understand that it's not just, oh, I'm going to school to learn maths or literacy, but if the school and the teachers change into a method, they can then learn maths and literacy and science, but in a different way, so that it's altered and embedded in something they enjoy. Another great topic to do is Lego. You can look at the polymers, the plasticization, you can look at the history of Lego, culture of Lego. Is it used in professional settings? Do it. I guarantee your children and their mental well-being and the stresses of exams or tests or just accessing the education will be improved with this strategy or this method of teaching. And it is supported by the Department for Education. So your teachers, head teachers, Senkos should know and ought to know about this method. Please use it. I again get a lot of information about who I am and my processes and how I came across pedagogy, how I came across using a DME for the purposes of gaining specialist education for my child. And I imparted in the beginning that I used a whole plethora of my legal background, my science background, and put it all together for the purposes of education, and eventually took on the United Kingdom because I no longer was allowed to have access to the UK courts on the grounds that it would cost too much, and by the time the case would have been resolved, my child would have finished education. I asked everybody in the UK in terms of lawyers, barristers, organisations, charities, etc., to help me, because I'd never put together an international legal case in my life before. But I went ahead and I did the research and I put all the component parts together and hoped for the best. And I submitted a case to the European Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg, and that is the evidence. My son signed it himself, which was an extremely proud moment because it took him 4 years to learn how to write his name. And that's all he can write, but he can write his name and his surname. That then went off to the European Court of Human Rights. And to be fair, I thought I didn't stand a hope in hell. It would just be put in the bin and torn up. Lo and behold, from that date, the 2nd of the 4th, 2005, 3 weeks later, I got a letter back saying, B. Willacot versus the United Kingdom. I was very scared to have to say that. However, I put it together. It took me 18 months, and the case was heard in the European Court of Human Rights, the single tier or the first chamber, where a judge heard my case. I wasn't looking for a specific win, but I was looking to make a statement in the fact that the government and the local authority and the schools had failed to address my son's needs. He was stuck in the middle. He didn't fit a special and he didn't fit a main, but yet he was double and multiple exceptional. How then? What do I do? And because I was denied any further justice in the UK, the court heard my case and they agreed with me. And what they couldn't do was further go on to order the UK, because I hadn't yet been to the Supreme Court. However, they said that I could take the recommendations back to the UK and say that if they didn't adhere with their recommendations, they would then take it to the Grand Chamber and overrule the UK with breaching my son's human rights. I took this recommendation back from the courts from Strasbourg and gave it back to the Department for Education and the courts and my local authority and said, here you go. It took them a further 2 years to abide by this, but everything else was born from that. And my child then was afforded on the grounds of double multiple exceptionality. Excuse me, that was my phone ringing. However, it's off. So I apologize for that. That is a really bad move from a professional. However, on the grounds of that and the double multiple exceptionality of my son, he was awarded a dual split placement. So he was given supported learning from a specialist provisional school and mainstream provisioning from a college, and also an alternative educational placement doing agriculture, horticulture, and I'm so proud to say that he's now training to become a chef in a mainstream environment, but is also supported by a specialist school in terms of his academia. So it is possible. It is possible to hold a government to account. It's possible to hold professionals to account. It's possible to hold your local authority to account and get the professionals to listen to you. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, you know your child, young person and adult, you know what they're capable of doing. You know them intrinsically. You know what they are capable of, in despite of their difficulties or disabilities. Whilst we also have to remain relative and real in knowing their limitations, we can also use their strengths and their exceptionalities for the best interests of themselves. So use these strategies that I'm giving to you. And so communication, bear with me now, Tally, I need to just have a look at my time just to make sure that I'm still on time, that I'm not over talking. But in terms of communication and strategy and language, often our children, young people and adults, especially with ASD, struggle to communicate the exacting thoughts, the exacting feelings. And often what we see is this anger of iceberg. What is this anger of iceberg? To try and understand their expressions, their feelings, we have to look at this iceberg. What is the anger? Where is the anger? And most notably, it's frustration, feeling rejected, feeling hurt, humiliated. And this is a really good exercise to take back to your schools or your local authorities to impart why your children and young people and adults have this behavior or have this feeling, especially when they cannot articulate it themselves. That said, you also need to look at your own communication strategies and your own language, and you must remember that you are not just a parent, you are not just a human, but you are an equal at the table when discussing your children and young people so they can further themselves. You are the first expert. You are the first expert, and you sit at the table equally. Just because you are up against the local authority, you have to bear in mind that these people are also human. They're also dealing with their own issues. personal, professional, or maybe they're under pressure to perform or reach a certain target. Be mindful of that as well. But also allow yourself to be seen and to be an equal, because that is you are. And use this anger iceberg as a way to, even for yourself, to communicate why you're feeling angry, because you feel frustrated, because you haven't been listened to, or why is my son or daughter or child displaying this behavior. Look at the communication, look at the body language. On the subject of communication and putting up processes, I was pleased to be awarded a certificate of excellence for my contribution to education and health, and it was an honor to be recognized for that, and because I think it's important that diversity and equality for all. Somebody said something.
I think Tally lost Zoom connection, so she's probably trying to get back on again.
Okay, fantastic. So empowerment, as I draw to a close, empower each other. And that is absolutely critical in building a community. And today we're all coming together to impart and embed and empower or inspire our own journeys, or to help and support our communities, because it is hard, it is tough. And the lesson that I have learned as a professional and as a parent is that it's often, when you go into these battles, when you go into these long-term battles for education or health or social care, we often go in fighting the fight. Try and not do that. You have to step back. And the way I impart this is by highlighting a boxer going into a boxing ring. Now, a boxer steps into a boxing ring knowing he's going to fight. And that is the empowerment just there. He steps into the ring knowing it's going to be tough, knowing it's going to be hard, and knowing he's going to be beaten at times. And that's okay. However, once you know that, you then become empowered and the stresses are released from you, which gives you more energy to stand your ground. You may lose several tiny battles, but if you keep up your strength and know that it's going to be hard, you will ultimately win the war. But whilst also empowering others, you also have to be mindful of yourself, because without you, your child, your family could also crumble. And you are effectively your own advocate, and you have to inspire yourself in your own empowerment, and not just from others as well. You can take from your friends, you can take from the community, but ultimately it's always down to you. Go to the beach, go swimming, read, stop, do the things you've always wanted to do, because when you do that, you feel more inspired, more empowered to carry forth and to continue the fight for your children and loved ones. And I also have to say that, coming back to the original question, as I now tie my session to an end, is the questions were, well, what do I normally do? Do I dance? Do I swim? Do I run? Well, coming back to some of those questions and statements, I was born in Africa, and my late father is British, English. My mother is German, and I was born in Africa, in Zimbabwe. I do swim, however, I am past 50, and I run, in particular, crazy, ultra stupid marathons, which people think I'm absolutely crazy at doing, but I enjoy running vast distances in really crazy environments. And there I am in the center of the picture. That was one of the ultra races I did, was running across the Sahara Desert. Why? Because I can, and because I wanted to do it. And I thought it was fantastic, and one of the best experiences of my life. And next year I'll be doing the desert in Namibia, the Namib Desert. So do those things you've always wanted to do crazy things, because that will ultimately inspire you and take away from the difficulties you face on a daily basis. Be your own empowerment as well. And so just lose the fear. Remember, you are an equal. You come to this world as an equal. Treat yourself that way. Lose the fear. Most notably, parents, family members who have children, young people with difficulties who have to go against governments are fearful. Don't be fearful. You are fighting for the rights of your child here. I lost my fear and realized that I wasn't equal, regardless if I was professional or not. And I'm not just a mother, I'm human, I'm a woman. And with all of that together, I decided that it was time to change the world and the UK, and I'm now writing my PhD for an Accountability Act to help and support the rest of our community. And collaboration, so that's basically what I do, my registrations, etc., etc. If you need my help or support or any further questions, please, by all means, get hold of Anna, get hold of Tally, or contact me, and I will try and endeavour to help you. But be mindful of that when you feel stuck in the middle, there is always a way and a possibility of restoring that, because the environments can change, how education is delivered can change. It's just a matter of using the correct language and information to make it happen. And let me just check the time, and I still have a bit of time left, and so I think we can go to some questions. So before I do, there is the young man in question, that is my son, who was told, and I quote, that all disabled people are the same and they can all go to the same environment. And there he is. I said, no, that is not correct. And my journey took somewhat 11 years, but he's now training to be a chef and absolutely loving it. And I'm getting slightly COVID fat because he's cooking me all the lovely food. And my team that I usually run with and do crazy things with, and so they have also inspired me and kept me in good faith as well. And I would like to also dedicate today's talk to Marino McGowan, who inspired me many, many, many years ago. And he said, Janet, you be the best version of yourself. And sadly, last year, he passed away to a short bout of illness. And so I'm going to take Marino's words and give them to you and say, be the best versions of yourselves so you can empower and impart that for your children. Breathe. And as I said, you have to conquer the struggle. Yeah, you have to accept that it's going to be hard. And to conquer the struggle, you need to accept the fight rather than fight against it. Because at the end of the day, you have the power, you have the control. Nothing changes if nothing changes. But also, you have to have fun along the way. And I generally have a funny sense of humor. And as you can see on one of the pictures I have there, submarine racing, with my funny sense of humor that says so intense, because I love watching submarines race. And so people think that's quite funny. I also tend to push the boundaries a little bit, and sometimes you have to push those boundaries, in particular when things should not be done, or you are told not to do things because it'll never work anyway. Follow your instinct and do it. And that's me in the Royal Courts of Justice in the High Court, where it says, do not take any photographs. And I thought, well, I'll take a photograph of my shoe instead. So that's me, be very rebellious. I am going to be getting married soon. We haven't yet got an official date, but from the darkness and from the struggle, there is possibility and hope. And on the left-hand side, I'm sure that's appearing to you, I don't know, is it on your left or your right? But on my left anyway, that's how I looked during my struggle. And 10 years later, or just after the 10-year period, withdrawn, haggard, absolutely depleted, Don't follow that same route. Rather look after yourself, empower yourself, do those things that are important, because when you do, on the right-hand side, that's me now. Vibrant, bright, I've come through it. And that is it. And there you go.
Excellent. That's fantastic. Absolutely amazing. As always, I'm always transfixed by your talks. It's been amazing. I don't know if has anyone got any questions. Laurie, did you want to say anything? Because I can see that you've really enjoyed the talk, and you're talking about how it's reminded you of gaslighting by professionals. And I know that, you know, she's going to be talking about her struggles in her life tomorrow. So Laurie, I don't know if you wanted to say anything. Oh, you're yeah.
Still muted.
That's
right,
okay.
Sorry. I'm actually feeling really upset. I'm really close to tears. So if I get blubby, then I don't care. Because so much of what you said, like my wee boy's 26 now, and it reminded me so much, a lot of the stuff you were talking about. I'm sitting there thinking, this is ideal, this is okay. But the times I've sat in multidisciplinary meetings at school after school after school, and then college, and then another college, and I had that situations where everybody's on first name terms. You write your report. Now I can write, okay? I can put a report together that puts everybody else's in kindergarten. And I sit there because I know that as a parent, I'm a professional. I've sat in meetings saying, you know what's happening at school. I know what's happening at home. We need to sit together and come up with something that works for this boy. And we've been in it, and I've had this. I had this at college after a comprehensive school failed. Now, my son had a diagnosis by then. He did not have a diagnosis when he was kicked out of 3 infant schools.
Yeah.
But he got his diagnosis by the time he went to comprehensive school with an autism unit in it. And I gave them a list. I said, this really doesn't work for him. This really does work for him. Nobody took any notice and nobody listened. The placement failed. Surprise! And this happens to lots and lots of parents. I mean, what you're saying, I'm not arguing with you, because what you're saying is fantastic. But professionals are notorious for knowing your child better than you know your child yourself, and they don't listen. Has anybody here sat in a multidisciplinary meeting when everybody else is on first name terms, and you walk in because you know you are a professional, because you know you are a professional, because you know your child, and you know in here that you're on an equal footing to everybody else? And it's John here and Maureen there and Dorothy over there and Raj or whoever else is in the room. And they look at you at the end of the meeting and say, is there anything Mum would like to say? And you can, you know, okay, so you can go like, for fuck's sake, how dismissive is that? How dismissive is that? How can we inspire educators to stop calling us mum and stop calling us dad? How can we do that? How can we be taken serious? The one time that I got listened to was after I graduated from university. I was into my 40s. I got a job with the National Autistic Society, and guess what? I had a lanyard. Now, my son was going to construction college. I did not want this placement to fail. It did not have to fail. I did not want that to be his experience of life. Because I believed in him. And what I said to him, now, I know these people get budgets. So I got my lanyard on, and I went there with the college, to the college, everything like that. Said, could I speak speak to the person who deals with the disabled students, please. Now, this little woman came along. She was about 5'1" high and 5'1" round. And she came over to me, and I walked up to her, and I shook her hand in a big, bold way. I'm Laurie Morgan. I work for the National Autistic Society. I'm here today with Martin. What can you do for him? You have never seen anybody move so fast. Why? If I'd have said I'm his mum, I know what would have happened.
I agree with you. I agree with you, Laurie. The reason I agree with you is that it took me a long, long time to realize that I was going into these meetings, and like you, I was just referred to as mum, Bastian's mum, mother, J or W or JW, and that's it. And it wasn't until I started using my credentials after my name that they suddenly went, oh, we better listen.
Absolutely.
Why? And I agree with you. And there is discrepancy. And by the virtue of that, it's discriminatory. By the very virtue of just referring to mom as simply mom and not as an equal is discrimination in itself. Because you're not just mum, you are Janet, you are Laurie, you are Mrs. this, you're Mr. that. And so that in itself is discriminatory. And so empowering others to go, no, I'm not mum, I am X, Y, and Z. And that's when parents have to just say, lose the fear and please refer me to X, Y, and Z. I am this person, I am a professional. And we can try and change the mindset of schools or the local authorities or the colleges. That's going to be hard. What we really need to focus on, or empowering others, is for them to take ownership of themselves. Go into that meeting, go, no, I'm not mother, I am Janet Willacot. That's how I want to be referred to. And I think that's how we can try and tackle some of this discrimination or the discrepancy or the underhanded tactics or the feeling of the fear. Go in as a human being with the aim of being equal. And I think if we can empower parents to start doing that from the onset, we're going to start changing or have a paradigm shift of change. Because at the end of the day, we can try and alter a local authority, we can try and alter a school or a head teacher. We know that's not going to really happen because do they care at the end of the day? There was an element of care. Are they worried? I don't think so. We can only change ourselves. So go in and empower these people to go, I am Laurie Morgan, I am Janet Willacot. Please don't refer to me as mother or mum. You know? I don't know.
I asked her at this particular meeting, I said, why are you calling me mum? She said, we consider it polite. And I said, no, it isn't, it's patronising.
Yeah, no,
and
no.
They didn't listen to me. They didn't take anything on board. My son's attendance, as was at the pattern, started to drop off and he lost his place. It's exclusion via the back door. You don't get the letter, really. You don't say, actually, this isn't working out. You know, it's just effing disgusting.
No,
I would like to see parents to be confident, to be empowered, to realise that you have known this child for decades. You know, you've brought this child into the world, you've grown with them, you understand them, you know what triggers them, and the schools need to listen to that instead of just dismissing it. And I suspect that is still happening now.
Oh, most notably it is. It is. It's still continuing. It is. And it's, you know, you can go in and try and alter the mind shift of a local authority, or get them to be more mindful. In fact, today I was writing a letter to a local authority asking them to be mindful of how they are coming across and what language they are using, and not just to expect that a parent would automatically know what they're saying. And whilst I can do that for a local authority, or highlight what a local authority is doing. At the same time, I'm also empowering my client to say, hold on a second, I am Mrs. X, do not talk to me like that. I'm an equal and a professional in my own capacity. Do not prefer me just to as mother, or expecting that I don't know anything because I speak a different language or come from a different country. It's empowering that self, empowering others to stand up for themselves. And that's where we need to focus on, because otherwise it's just going to continue. If there are 15,000, 20,000, 50,000, 100,000 of us that go in and say, no, this is how you speak to me, I think then government departments and authorities will start thinking, oh, you better be more mindful. It's that mindfulness, I think. Yeah, but no, I agree with you, Laurie. I really do. I hear you, and I hear your frustration as well. I really do. It's frustrating and off-putting, but you are an equal.
Do they do these things deliberately, or are they just ignorant? Is it a game plan to disarm us and make us feel, well, to put us out of sorts, so to speak, so that we're on the back foot when we go in, or is it just ignorance? Sometimes I wonder.
I mean, having worked with a multitude of local authorities now and looking at their operation, looking at their understanding, and I really have, especially over the last sort of 2-3 months during COVID, it's been fantastic, rich data coming for my PhD. And it is somewhat ignorance. It is lacking understanding. It's a little bit of ego that I'm a authority representative. However, there is also another notion that I've seen from this process, is that the junior officers, the grading scale, often they are told what to say. They are told what to do. They are told what to think. They are told that this is the law and you only have to comply with that. And going through the ranks and highlighting where the failings are, or no, that's incorrect law you've used. Eventually, I've gone all the way through to just dealing with legal departments now, because the officers don't want to get into trouble. They are slowly starting to realize that the information that they are holding is indeed incorrect. And so now, it's also sloppy to be called Mrs. Surname. Do we not have the same? Oh, right, okay. So now dealing with local authority legal departments has opened up this whole can of worms in trying to unpick where the problems are. Is it the legal departments that are not imparting the correct strategy, analysis process? Is it the chief executive? Is it the Department for Education? Is it who? Because again, there is no accountability, and the buck has to stop somewhere. And if the legal departments do not know the legislation, then how are the senior principal or junior officers supposed to know as well? And although most people don't really want to hear this, and I find myself saying this really in a very odd capacity, but be mindful of those junior staff members, because they actually have been fed false information, and they just don't know. And what they do then is their back gets straightened, because they are then threatened to follow this path. We come along and say, no, that's incorrect. And so they're then caught between a rock and a hard place. And so rather than saying, well, I want to deal with this officer, just go straight to the legal department. Just go straight to the senior principal officer. That way you eliminate all the stress and you impart the absolute critical points of law. Then we won't have to go and fight and fight and fight and fight, or go through lengthy tribunals or court cases or hearings, because it's really stressful.
That's great advice, because I didn't realize that when I was going through this, that the person I was speaking to was nothing more than a junior, but they were attending all the meetings. But I never knew that, because and then when I did, I would not have anything to do with her, because she was just relaying what I was saying to the next person, and it's like Chinese whispers as well.
Yeah.
She wasn't taking any notes during the meeting. There was hardly any notes taken. So I just, in the end, I would not have any meetings with this person whatsoever. And I apologized to her, and I said, it's not her fault. And I understand that it's your job and you've been told to do this, but remember, this is my son's life that we're talking about. It's not, he's not a number on a list. And she did understand that, however difficult it was, and it was a bit of a pain, but I would not have anything to do with her or anyone else of that level, because we weren't getting anywhere. And I think you're exactly right. It's about standing your ground. It's about knowing what you want and going for it, and not being swayed by what the local authorities and people in front of you are saying. And like you were saying to me yesterday, we have to remember they are just people like you and me. They aren't, we've no need to put them up on a pedestal or anything. In fact, they should be putting us up on a pedestal for what we go through. But I know that we're going over time. We've got a small issue with our next speaker. Alexander's got a cluster migraine, and I know that when you get a cluster migraine, that's it, you're knocked out. And this is not like her. She's usually amazing. So we can carry on for a little while longer, because I've not heard from her. So I don't know if there's any more questions that people might have, or if there's anything else that you want to add, Janet, because we do have a bit of time.
Well, I'm just going through some of the chats here. So the answers. So yes, African runner 50 to 60. There you go. So I just, I want kind of a little bit of a feedback, really. What did people think of that? The biased exercise, or the unconscious bias exercise? Because I always think it's a good icebreaker, really, and it makes people think. Especially using social media nowadays, and people are very quick to judge or criticize or not really understand the point that comes across. And so often one is, you say something in a very factual, scientific manner, and then they're not understanding that, and then they criticize and judge you just based on one statement. It's difficult then to unpick or point out without then being accused of offending anyone. And I know from, certainly Anna goes through it a lot in terms of attacking one's disposition or processes or pathways. And as a scientist, one has to look at the overall picture. It's not just one particular point that you look at. To glean information, you have to look at all angles, and often people use their unconscious bias to then criticize me because I look at all different angles and arrive at a point by looking at a balanced, more holistic viewpoint. And everybody has a right to choose a pathway or a process or an education or a particular pathway that they want to choose, and we have to then use that bias or unconscious bias that we have in a very mindful way. And as Nessie says, I agree that we all are biased, no matter how hard we try not to be. One thing I like to practice every day of my life is trying not to listen to my preconceptions. Yes, and I agree, Nessie, and I think that's very, very good, and that's what I try to do every day as well, is to be mindful and just to think in a very holistic, equal way, that maybe that person is feeling like that because it's learned behavior, or they're upset, or why are they doing that, or why are they saying that? And especially with local authorities and head teachers, and the pressure for them to perform at a certain level all the time is really difficult. And often we will come along and say, no, that's not the way to do it. And they tend to explode and or think that Janet Willacot, aka the mother of Bastian, is now being vexatious, when actually it's not. So we all have this bias, and we need to change it really and be more mindful. That's all I can say. And so Brian says, my dad was born in Africa. Well, Brian, I'd like to know where. Africa's a huge place, and I do love Africa. I love the hotness, the weather. That said, it's beautiful today. I'm looking outside my window. It's the sun shining. Long may it last. Yeah, Tally, no, that was a great question. I understand where where Laurie's coming from, rather. She also says that my son's a looker. Thank you very much. Great genetics. I hope. I hope. Let's see. I know it's reminding me of how frustrating it is. Telly, is there anything else? Any other questions? Let's see. I'm from Africa too. Oh yes, so there you go.
Yes. Jumble. Yeah, no. I think that's it. I think.
Can you just remind people of your website, please, Janet, if you don't mind?
Oh yes, of course. So my website is www.normal-like-me.com.
I think I shared that earlier on in the chat, but I think I had a bit of a power cut and everything switched off, so I've lost.
Oh no, don't worry.
Yeah, so
just put it in the chat, so you can go and see me there.
Brilliant. And what about the regular? You do your Facebook lives?
Oh yes, I do.
Yes.
Yeah, I do. So on Facebook, I do send sessions live. Because I think it's good to give back in a pro bono sense. And oh, thank you, Marla. It's so lovely to see you. I was due to meet up with Marla for cake and coffee, as you do, and then lockdown happened. So hopefully we'll get cake and coffee soon, Marla. So yes, I do send sessions live, usually every Wednesday evening from 8 p.m. to 9 p.m., where I highlight processes, judicial review, what law to use, how to embed, how to impart, how to empower yourself on a variety of topics, what to do, or what to write in the educational health and care plan, health principles, process, you name it, I do it. So send sessions live. And it's you can see me on my Facebook. So my Facebook is Janet Willacot, personal Facebook. My professional page is Normal Like Me, and then it has a sub page called Send Sessions Live. So if you just type that in, I'll put it down here. Send Sessions Live. So you can go there and log on, and you can watch all my past videos. And
it's really funny. I found that by accident, and the first time I saw you, you were in full flow and so angry. I was literally, whoa, this is amazing. And it was just the information that I got in that short period of time was worth its weight in gold. So I highly recommend to everybody to join in on those Facebook lives, because obviously, you know, you can respond to questions, but also you're up to the minute on stuff that's happening. So I don't need to go and trawl through a whole load of stuff. I can get it all from my regular dose of Janet Willacot. So, so it's brilliant.
I'm fortunate now to have a platform, and I use it in a way that can benefit from everybody. And my legal send journey difficulties cease to be about me, cease to be about my son 2 years into our battle, because that's when I started realizing that this is bigger than I thought it was. This affects absolutely everybody. And so that's when I've just, Janet, friend request sent. Perfect. Thank you, Laurie. I will look forward to that. And yeah, it's just imparting the processes and those alternative strategies or alternative legislative nuances that can be used. As often some barristers, some solicitors only stick with the prescriptive legislative pathway, and you become kind of then just stuck into a path or a pattern. So I like to use varying pathways or varying health, education and law practices or legislative practices to secure provision or education or pathways. It can be done. And so, yeah, giving back is good. Giving back is good.
Can you see any patterns emerging now in lockdown, for example, within the local authorities using excuses because of lockdown and cuts? Can you see any patterns sort of emerging in the background?
Oh, definitely. There's definitely a theme coming through, and it's the theme of we're not sure about the funding, or we're not sure about the provision, or we can't really talk or communicate with the school, or we don't know the law. And so generally it's a practice of misfeasance or malfeasance or malpractice. And that's ultimately possibly not just the ignorance, but it's malpractice. And that's the theme that's coming through. And that is, again, the not being highlighted enough or not being trained. The senior executives haven't gone through the correct training, therefore they haven't imparted that to their juniors. And so it's malpractice, really. That is ultimately the theme. It's malpractice. Very rarely is it malicious. Although that said, malicious practices do happen, and they are happening more frequently, and that's a worry. Because if parents don't consent, or if they don't agree, or if they're not articulate enough to put forward their case, what happens then is that the social care departments use safeguarding as a means to control the parent's decision, and ultimately affects the child's educational social care pathway, and that in itself is malicious. So,
are they sticking to timeframes, or is that going out the window?
Timeframes, unfortunately, still go out the window. There are timeframes just don't exist anymore. So they're using COVID as or lack of staff as an excuse. Yeah, and that's appalling, really. And there are hotspots of local authorities where they keep continuously getting it wrong, and I get that local authorities feel somewhat outed when I go in and say, you are doing this incorrectly, or you are not following due process, because I wouldn't like somebody coming into my home or into my business saying, well, you should be doing X, Y, and Z, you haven't done that. Although I wouldn't allow for myself to be in that position, because I would ensure that if I'm legislating, I would get it correct. I would do it in the correct capacity. So I understand why they get angered by me. I understand why they feel the need to go up against me. That said, they just haven't been trained. They haven't had the correct information. And so, yeah, it's malpractice. And I also need to impart that in this country, we have what is called rule of law. The rule of law is that everybody's equal to the same process. Everybody's entitled to have the same litigation processes. And also what that means is that ignorance of the law is not a legal defense to it. And so when local authorities say they didn't know or they didn't understand, that's not their defense. They can't use that because they can't state they didn't know. So that's a good point to have. The rule of law needs to be abided by everybody, including the Queen herself. And, you know, it was highlighted, in fact, I think was it November, I think, when our government went to the Supreme Court because they had ruled on a particular issue. And Lady Hale, I think, said, we have to abide by the rule of law. You can't just make your own decisions and pathways. So again, you know, that highlights that the rule of law is equal for everybody to everybody. And not knowing the law is not a defense therein. So Marla says, London Borough Croydon are notorious for malpractice. Keep your eye on them. I do know that. My eye is on them, Marla. So you've got a point about parents who are less articulate, non-English speakers, for instance. What happens to these guys? Laurie says, Laurie, I do hope you are well, love, and I will, once I'm finished, I will make contact with you. So yes, what happens to BAME communities? What happens to our less abled, articulate speakers? You know, again, this morning I was litigating for a family who are extremely articulate and very knowledgeable, but struggle with imparting the correct words or the correct language. And so, yeah, what happens to these families? What happens then? And often, if, you know, someone like me does not support them, then they are then left to suffer the consequences, or their children do not get the support, or they are then left to prosecution, or they are then left without provisioning, etc., etc. And so, yeah, that is definitely something that someone could take over the research for that and write a report, perhaps, because that needs to be, you know, looked into. Everybody needs to be afforded the same processes, regardless if you struggle with language or not. Let's see, I'm okay now. Good, well done. Well done, Laurie. I will make contact with you. We've got, so Nessie says, we would love to do that at the moment as a very small charity. We are all volunteers, but our aim is to a point.
Sorry, that was for me, because Nessie would love to do something by the sound of it. But I was just saying that we're a tiny charity, and everything we do for free at the moment, and every penny goes into supporting as many people as we can. We don't get paid. So in the future, if we can get some fundraising in, some money in, we would most definitely love to pay people, because we know that some of you have made careers out of speaking and writing and whatever, and we would love to support you, and we will do that at some point. But at the moment we're struggling ourselves, but we're getting there, and we do remember you, and we do like to do the best that we can. And you know, so yes, I'm sorry that we can't do anything at the moment, but we're growing, fingers crossed.
I mean, Angela's got a very good point. She says, what about parents, people, children, young people, young adults who have no broadband, or in fact a computer, and in fact the confidence to go online, or the confidence to research, or join support groups. And I get that, Angela. I hear you. And researching is I mean, I'm a research scientist, and it's difficult, even for me. However, once you know how to research, it becomes easier. And it's like with anything, it's practice, 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 and it's building that confidence. And so start with something small. In fact, I did do a Send Sessions live on how to research. And so you can go and find, if you go into Send Sessions Live, and if you type in research, because most of the time I do a hashtag with key points or keywords, and so it'll come up. And starting off really small, maybe saying, oh, I want to know or understand the Send Code of Practice, for example. And so by going on to the Send Code of Practice, you can read it. It'll then give you keywords, and you take those keywords and you impart it or embed it into another document, or if you embed it into another search criteria, that will lead you to something else. And so researching is trying to find the key words of one particular document. So what is the SEND code of practice? Well, special educational needs and disabilities, law, education. And so you'll have generally 4, 5, 6 key words. And it's the key words that you need to use to research with. And one document will lead you to another, which will lead you to another, to another, and to another. And that's how you build on your progress or skills of researching. But it's not easy. You just have to keep practicing. However, addressing the no broadband and no IT, I'm not up to date with the current IT broadband computer systems within the UK, but I think as part of NHS public health, I should know this, but it's not my particular area, but as part of public health processes, that there is going to be a rollout that every household should have IT, every household should have a computer, and there are links that you can have broadband installed or charitable organizations that will do that. And so it's working on those processes, working on getting hold of charities or getting hold of the government research websites that will tell you where you can get IT and computers from. But it's hard work getting there. And so that's something that I could put together for your organization, and maybe they can, your members then can have a look at those links and then spread them out and share them. Or I could do a SEND sessions live on that as well, and give out that information. By the way, if any speakers want to know how to get PowerPoint presentations up in show mode so we don't see your desktop or slide thumbnails, give me a shout. That's probably me, Laurie. Probably me. So yes, I will definitely be calling on your expertisms to deliver presentation mode, because I don't think it was on presentation mode. I think it was on slide mode.
Yeah, well, whatever it was. No, you didn't open in show mode. I can show you how to do it. So we just get your front slide up. Maybe we can have that. This is just a public service announcement. I can show you how to do this. I am not going to charge you for it. It's anybody here who does them. I know Juliana earlier, she had the same thing. And it just gives that, no, this is taking my presentation training. But it's something that's really useful to do, and it just saves people sitting there shuffling papers and stuff like that. So it could be useful for anybody there. So just get in touch, let me know, and we can have like a Facebook chat or something offline. And it's so easy. You'll go like, why did I not know this before? Well, tomorrow you'll see how I do it.
Well, I just want to say thank you, because we've had some beautiful comments as well. Nessie is saying that today she's heard some of the best speakers ever. So she's extremely happy that she's found us and has found this whole day extremely helpful. So that's absolutely fantastic. And Angela Ray, I'm happy as I have learnt a huge amount, but I think it's not fair on parents who don't have the support. Operational diversity and not fine in school have been great at giving help. So
thank you.
Fantastic.
Brilliant. So I think it's been a great first day, Anna.
Yeah, lovely. It's a shame about Alexandra, because she's an excellent speaker and she's a great supporter of our charity. So I've just messaged her saying I hope she's well, because she's not someone who lets us down. She's always there. So I just want to say thank you to everyone. Just really appreciate it. And are you painting, Juliana? Did I see a tin of paint in your hand with a brush? You're on mute. She isn't muted, is her?
Are you ready? I'm unleashed. I'm unmuted. You did see a paintbrush. Just, there was a little
She's multitasking.
Pardon?
You're multitasking.
I'm multitasking, but because I had to change position with the iPad, I noticed a little patch that needed doing, and because of my OCD, I thought, I can't just paint that before I can concentrate. And by the way, I've cried today again. I can't believe it. But do you know what's really so emotional for me? I mean, we've all fought and we're all fighting for our children and these other children. But what absolutely, the strength of people and the things I've learned, and I'm just in awe. But what has really made me cry today is that we have to fight this hard in the first place.
Yeah.
What other people take for granted with their kids just not sailing through, but by comparison, and I'm choked up now. I just think it's so wrong when everybody has a human right to an education, and just how hard we have to fight. My own son's funding, when I got it, I was told, people at that level don't speak to people like you. And I took my sandwiches along and I thought, well, we'll change that. I'm not being aggressive. I'm just eating my sarnies and I'm going to wait to speak to the main person. And I did. I got the funding. But then it got legally spent elsewhere, and it was legal. Because that was the other thing I meant to share earlier, is that even when you get the funding, it doesn't always go into a little envelope with your child's name on it.
Yeah.
So if you get funding, any parents out there, please make the school accountable. Make sure that it is spent on your child. So,
do you know what? Can I say something here? Do you know what I found working in education, and other people may know it as well, it should not be a secret.
no.
But when your child gets that funding pot, it goes into the school pot.
Yes.
That's not going on your child. I think it's something that you have to push for. And another thing, that I think this is massively immoral. Take, for instance, if you have a child living with you, and then your child goes into residential care, or for instance, or foster care, or they're no longer living with you, they go and live with their other parent, you lose your benefits for that child. Yet, in the education system, each school they go to gets this little funding pot. They then, what happens too often is they exclude the child and keep the money. How right is that?
Yeah.
It makes me so angry.
Well said.
Yeah.
The money should stay with the child.
Yes.
I think you're spot on there, Laurie. Yeah. The money should follow the child and not be embedded into a pot within the school. That's something that I would like to, in fact, put into my notes for my research.
Yes.
Do they not? I mean, it's sort of like in a business, you have to be accountable for every penny, where it goes and in what department, what paper clips you bought and all of that kind of stuff. Does that not apply to this huge chunk of money that's following my son around? So should there not be, this was spent on speech and language to my son, this was spent on buying him this, that and the other. So is there no report that we can access to say this is what your son cost?
You can, yes. You can contact the school or the local authority under Freedom of Information, and they then have to impart how much money they've received or how much funding they've received and how much they've spent on what. So yes, do an FOI, Freedom of Information, and request that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Sugar.
roll on tomorrow. So thank you.
Yeah, it's been amazing. For me, I was just worried about the
Juliana.
internet
Sorry,
connection.
Janet.
No, thank you, everybody. It's been lovely. Yeah, please do keep in contact.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you for everyone.
Take care,
for coming.
everyone.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
See you tomorrow. Bye. Bye.
Bye.